Here. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the comprehensive yet informal and, to be honest, increasingly frustrating in some ways uh, study of Kant's critique of pure reason, the masterwork of early philosophy that is so foundational for remotely everything that comes after. Maybe not literally everything, but many, like, yeah, it's influential for sure. We're in the transcendental logic where we've gone through the deduction, the metaphysical and transcendental, um, after outlining like kind of what the logic was, and also like discovering the categories, and their logical functions. But we then move into those deductions, and we are now seeing how the principles we learned about and deduced. Then there was a schematism in between there and here, which showed how they connect to intuitions, and now we're kind of seeing direct applications of them, and it all has to do with time for arguments that Kant lays out, with it being the inner form of intuition. So now we're here seeing how they're getting applied in the section which is called systematic representation of all synthetic principles. You can see here. So yeah, that's just some broader context for where we are in this project. Based on the views on the YouTube channel, doesn't seem like people are going in order, so maybe just some broader context helps. And Pat here is now going to give us some more particular context, given that he's just more familiar with the work and the overall, like, how things connect. And because that's one of the reasons I started this project, was to get a lot more familiar with that, because coming out of undergrad, even though I had read a bit of it, was not super familiar. So I wanted to get intimate with it. We hope you are also able to do that despite some of the confusions. And yeah, so here's Pat going to give us a rundown of more specifically of where we are and where we're coming from.
So we're in the systematic representation of all synthetic principles. For Kant, a principle is something I would, again, just call an axiom. He makes a kind of distinction where an axiom is more specific, but basically it's something that you fundamentally can't, like, it's the basis of things. You can't exactly argue for it, but it's foundational, right? Kant is a foundationalist. He thinks there are certain foundations to our knowledge. And the synthetic principles are the basis of our knowledge insofar as it is thought rather than given to us, insofar as it is conceptual rather than intuitive, insofar as it is active rather than passive, right? Insofar as it is unified rather than manifold, we need to arrange it according to certain synthetic unities, and the synthetic principles are the basis of that synthetic unity. All right, so right now we're doing the one, or we just did the one, I should say, analogies of experience. We're in the middle of analogies of
Yeah,
experience.
haven't finished it yet,
And
but
he said he gave two different versions, right? Their general
yep.
principle, as regards their existence, all appearances stand under a priori rules of the determination of their relation to each other in one time. And secondly, experience is only possible through the representation of a necessary connection of perceptions. Okay, so um, our quandary earlier was he talked about the fact that apperception says everything is unified insofar as it is all part of one time, right? Every manifold, anything that appears to us, um, it all is part of the same one time that is fundamentally our time as a result of our perception, right? That self knowledge. Okay, good so far. And apparently, this one unity also implies a necessary connection according to a rule. Now, looking back at that principle, I'm now just thinking, okay, maybe he means the necessary connection that they are all part of one time. Sure, I could admit that. But he seems to also use this to derive the idea of causality, like the idea that one thing should have a necessary rule that transitions from one rule to the next. But we might not be there yet. So that's part of the confusion. I'm like, I just was not sure what is the argument from, yeah, everything needs to be in one time and unified as part of one time, to everything needs to follow in accordance of a rule of cause to effect. I just don't quite get that yet.
Yeah,
right?
I was
He says,
looking it up a bit. I found some like guides and secondary sources, mostly from like professor lectures. So I mean, take from that what you will. But these seem to be from actual philosophy courses, higher level from universities. So hopefully there's some like scholarly backing here. I'll look into it more. But yeah, the general idea I gathered from those was kind of what Patrick was saying about time being the one rule by which we're able to see let me get it, persistence. Um, these. Although simultaneity didn't seem to matter as much, but we're able to like uh, experience these, uh, in our experience and see them actively in objects and not in them. Boy, this is actually hard to explain, but yeah, basically we can have these modi of time in our experience because um, something to do with substance. And I'm guessing he's going to elaborate more on that. But the rule by we can identify a substance despite the change in time because of something having to do in the rule of apperception. It's a little vague, but like there's some sort of connection here with substance, and that Pat gave a good example with like the wax
that
and with
sounds like the
Descartes.
wax again. Yeah,
Yeah,
Descartes saying basically, yeah, that sounds like the wax again. Which, for those of you who didn't catch the last one, uh, the wax being Descartes' example of wax, which melts and changes all its properties, and yet rationally, Descartes says, "I know it's the same wax." So the substance is an independent substrate of all the properties in Descartes' vision. So Kant does seem to be taking that on just as a phenomenal thing rather
of
than
course. Yeah, Descartes
a
thinks they're
function.
substance in themselves, presumably. Everything.
Whereas Kant is
Yeah,
like, this is just an inherent characteristic of our minds and the way we perceive things.
as is everything in this section, by the way, unless like otherwise like explicitly stated. um,
Yeah,
we'll
that's
get to
usually
why that's a
Kant,
lot. Well, I
though.
mean, if you saw the aesthetic and read the aesthetic, yeah, it's a bit more clear what he means there. But yeah, it'll come back later. I do know that much, despite not having gone through this whole thing once yet. So, but anyway, that's why I'm here. Did you have any other uh collaborations before?
Did I have any other elaborations? No, not for right now. Like I said, I was somewhat confused by the argument, but if you're saying that people reference substance,
Yes, they did.
that does seem like the same general idea I had in my first attempt at understanding what he's saying, which is that, um, can you actually scroll up?
Yep. To the Modi
Further,
or further?
further, uh, down.
This page?
Yes. Uh, yeah. Which constitutes what is essential in cognition of objects in the senses. Now, to be sure, yeah, right. In order for things to be an object, basically there has to be a substance, right? And
Yes.
so,
That seemed to
yeah.
be what was happening there. And the reason, yeah, the three modi of time are sort of, see, that's what I was a little confused on. I don't know if he was saying like these are what allow us to have the substance, or the substance is like, it seemed like the substance is
Well,
what
the
allows
modi,
us to
only
have
one
the
of them is
object in spite of like there being multiple modi of time. But that was a
well,
little,
okay, well, it seems to be in order for in order to for us to have an object, we have to have substance. And in order for substance to change and thus for there to be succession, we have to have
modi of time.
we have to have we have to have cause and effect. Because otherwise, how would we know it's the same
Is that
substance?
what he was, is he referring to this here?
Uh, if we're referring to synthetic unity, it was at the end of the first paragraph. So scroll up, keep going.
Yeah, since
Yeah, since apprehension is only a juxtaposition of the manifold of empirical intuition, no representation of the necessity of the combined existence of appearances that it juxtaposes in space and time is to be encountered in it, right? So, in other words, you would just have manifold A, manifold B, juxtaposed with no connection, right? Unless there wasn't such thing as necessary connection. But since experience is a connection of objects through perception, and consequently the relation of the existence of the manifold is to be represented in it not as juxtaposed in time, but as it is objectively in time. And yet, since time itself cannot be perceived, the determination of the existence of objects in time can only come about through their combination in time in general, and hence through a priori connecting concepts. So basically, in order to have objects rather than just manifolds standing next to each other,
There needs to be a
um,
necessary connection.
there needs to be a necessary connection, or several or rules of necessary connection in general. So, actually, I feel like I understand this a lot more at the beginning of this conversation than I did at the end of the last time. But I
That's
guess
usually
that's the
also how
secondary
Kant goes.
sources.
Wait, what'd you say?
And
Sorry.
time to think about it. But I guess that's secondary sources plus time to think about it.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
all right.
Yeah. I, what? Yeah, it's a good idea. I think maybe now to be more familiar with the work before I do a recorded comprehensive study. I thought it would go a lot smoother, but hey, that's part of learning. So, and we're having a good time. So, not a loss at all. Just a thing to note. Anyway, so that brings us to where we're at here with these principles.
Okay.
Yeah, Kirk is here also. Hello, Kirk. And would you like to start us off with the reading?
Yeah, so these principles have the peculiarity that they do not concern the appearances in the synthesis of their empirical intuition, but merely their existence and their relation to one another with regard to their existence. Now, the way in which something is apprehended in appearance can be determined a priori, so that the rule of its synthesis at the same time yields this intuition a priori in every empirical example, i.e., can bring the former about from the latter. Yet the existence of appearances cannot be cognized a priori, and even if we could succeed on this path in inferring to some existence to other, we would still not be able to cognize it determinately, i.e., be able to anticipate that through which its empirical intuition is differentiated from others.
Okay.
Does
So is he basically saying here that like we can, well, after we have uh like an existent empirical determination, we can like sort of abstract out the a priori from it, but then we can't do the reverse. We can't a priori um bring about empirical appearances. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Just seeing if I missed anything.
Well, it seems like Kant, if this is the case, it sounds like he's taking more of an empiricist view than a rationalist view.
Well,
Uh,
this is kind of the thing about Kant is that he doesn't really pick a side in that debate. This is actually a great example of like how he's like sort of saying both in some way, right? Because he's saying, okay, we have our empirical things and there are necessary conditions by which they're possible. So after like seeing the empirical example, um, we can bring about the former from the latter, right? We can bring about the a priori rule of synthesis, but we can't do the opposite or the inverse, whatever you want to say. We can't anticipate through those principles another empirical specific thing. So he's saying there's both. There's an empirical part and an a priori part. The a priori is responsible, but that doesn't mean we can just tell everything through the a priori principle, which again to me seems to be like contradicting the nature wizard thing that he said at the beginning. But I don't know if we should get back into that again. We've already had lots of like context. So, but does that make sense, Kirk?
Yeah, so it basically sounds like he's disagreeing with the rationalist deduction of like metaphysical or ontological specifics, but agrees with rationalists that there's a priori things which are necessary for further thought or axioms.
Yeah,
more or less.
yeah. So he's not just totally disavowing like rationalism. Um, if you even the best example, like I've always like thought, is just in the transcendental aesthetic. You can really see that at work. But yeah, this is a good example here of it as well. Okay, cool. Uh, Pat, would you want to read the next paragraph?
Sure. Okay. The preceding two principles, which I have named the mathematical ones in consideration of the fact that they are justified applying mathematics to appearances, pertain to appearances with regard to their mere possibility, and taught how both their intuition and the real in their perception could be generated in accordance with rules of mathematical synthesis. Hence, how in both cases numerical magnitudes and, with them, the determination of appearance and magnitude could be used. E.g., I would be able to compose and determine a priori, i.e., construct the degree of the sensation of sunlight out of about 200,000 illuminations from the moon. Thus, we call the former principles constitutive. I feel like I have so little to say about this. Would you like me to keep going?
Um, I just got a little lost with the
Okay, it's very
words.
simple. He's just
Yeah.
recapping. Like he calls the earlier principles, the first two
Yeah, I got that
mathematical.
part. It's just with the
Well,
example, I got a little like I think it's just the
the
words.
example he's using is that is intensive magnitude, and he's saying basically that there's a possibility of more and less intense magnitudes, and the principle only dealt with possibilities of experience, not the possible order between different experiences, but like the bare possibility, like what kinds of things are possible.
Okay. Oh, okay. Sorry. I thought he was, yeah, that example just threw me off for some reason. Yeah, okay. You can move on. Sorry about that.
Okay, continuing then. Things must be entirely different with those principles that are to bring about the existence of appearances under rules a priori. Right? This is why these are dynamical principles rather than mathematical, because they deal with things as they actually are and not as
Exist.
they
Yeah.
possibly could be. Uh, for since this existence cannot be constructed, these principles can concern only the relation
Relation.
of existence and can yield nothing but merely regulative principles. Here, therefore, neither axioms nor intuitions are to be thought of. Rather, if a perception is given to us in temporal relation to others, even though indeterminate, it cannot be said a priori which and how great this other perception is, but only how it is necessarily combined with the first, as regards its existence in the modus of time. In philosophy, analogies signify something very different from what they represent in mathematics. In the latter, they are always formulas that assert the identity of two relations of magnitude and are always constitutive, so that if two members of the proportion are given, the third is also thereby given, i.e., can be constructed.
Hmm.
In philosophy, however, the analogy is not the identity of two quantitative, but of two qualitative relations, where from three given members I can cognize and give a priori only the relation to a fourth member, but not this fourth member itself, although I have a rule for seeking it in experience and a mark for discovering it
Oh,
there.
this is great. This is Kirk, what we were talking about off camera about like Kant's like existence thing. This is that that's at least as I understand it right now, like exactly what I was talking about. Where like we can't assume like the actual like existent qualitative attributes of um an object or representation just because we have the principles of them. Whereas like other rationalists, like maybe like Spinoza, would proceed to do that. Um,
Yeah. Um,
just wanted to
okay.
make that
Yes,
interesting
continuing.
point there. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Although I have a rule for seeking an experience and a mark for discovering it there. An analogy of experience will therefore only a rule in accordance with which unity of experience is to arise from perceptions, not as perception itself, as empirical intuition in general. And as a principle, it will not be valid of the objects of appearances constitutively, but merely regulatively. Okay.
So by regulatively means like
Is there? Can I look at the
qualitative.
footnote?
Oh,
Any?
68. It's not a
Is
footnote,
that
it's
an
an
end note?
endnote, but
Oh, it's an end note.
I have my physical copy. So I
I have
will.
my physical copy. I'll get it.
Oh, okay.
I thought it was a footnote, but I
No,
would like to look at that
yeah,
footnote
yeah. I'm gonna
or
I'm gonna
that
pull it
endnote.
up. Which one is it? 298. Footnote
68.
68. I think 298.
298, 68. Okay.
Quite different.
Interesting. A quite different explanation for the use of the term analogy as the designation for the principles of substance, causation, and community is given at
I never know
R4675.
what they mean by that, like R notation.
R. It's probably in the
Oh, at
beginning
page
of the note
648.
section.
Okay.
It's probably in the beginning of the
At page
like.
648
It's
it
one of
says,
Kant's earlier works. It's going to be one of Kant's earlier
"Oh,
works, is what it is, because it says 1775.
oh, that's the year." I thought it was like a page numbers.
Yeah, I think it's the year
It is.
anyway.
You're right. Yeah. Yep.
So it's talking about some of Kant's earlier works and him using the word analogy to mean something else, I guess. Um,
Quite different indeed.
I mean, thanks. So
Regulatively.
okay, not exactly what I was hoping to get from that end note. I
You're
was
hoping
hoping for a
for
little
some
bit
like
more of a
context.
gloss
Yeah.
on what that regulatively meant. Uh, uh, so constitutively, I feel like I get it, right?
Well, yeah, I
Uh,
think it means that's what they mean. A quite different meaning by analogy. Like so all we can do is make an analogy to something. Like if we have like the two things, right? And we have like the rules by which we can like anticipate like a synthesis. Like that's just but we can only do it in analogy. We can't like posit it into existence. Um
I don't really know what you mean by that, but I'm asking about the term regulatively.
well that's what he's saying. He's opposing it to so like right we have in mathematics he's talking about it being constitutive.
Yeah,
Um
that one makes sense, right? So
right,
if you
but
do
then he's
trigonometry, for example, if you know two angles, you can always get the third angle.
yes.
It's it's like constitutive in that you
Yeah,
know exactly what follows.
but by
But
reg
I'm not sure what he means by regulatively here.
he means qualitative. He oh my god. Hold on, the McAfee thing just popped up on my fucking oh my god. Right in the middle of my
Didn't he run for president?
the antivirus.
Yeah, didn't he run for president? I feel like he ran for president.
I I don't know. Um anyway, excusing that interruption. How I'm seeing it anyway, there it's basically the difference between this here, quantitative versus qualitative. It's that constitutive versus regulative.
Quantitative versus qualitative. But he's saying
Relations.
what makes it constitutive is not merely that it's quantitative. What makes
With
it
that you can't
constitutive
anticipate it. But what you just said.
exactly.
But
It's
yeah,
like you know exactly what's gonna follow.
right. But Kant's saying we can do that regulative based on the context here. I'm guessing this means you can in philosophy you can do that with like what does he call them, members. You can do that with a member, but you can't. That doesn't mean you're gonna like actually find it in empirical experience. Mathematics, like you're gonna find it like in the same way. You know what I mean? Get like if you're looking at like a drawing.
Oh, meaning that like you never actually experience cause and effect.
Yes, exactly. Even though we can like
It's
anticipate it.
exactly what Hume was saying, like the where's cause? It's nowhere to be
Exactly.
found. Where's
Exactly.
substance? It's
Yes.
nowhere to be
Because
found.
he
Well, they're
was trying
merely
to say
regulative principles, whereas the
exactly.
other actually
It's
constitute.
constitutive.
Okay, that makes sense to me.
Yes. Yes.
Yes, I understand. That makes perfect
Let's
sense to me.
go. This might be the first time I've explained something to Pat, and
Something
he's
to me, and like
done.
I've been like, oh, okay, that totally makes sense. I get it. Yeah, pretty much.
We're doing multiple yippies for that one, fellas. That's a landmark historical. Oh my god,
Landmark
I'm
historical
understanding
moment.
Kant
Yeah.
on my own.
There
Holy,
you
well, not
go.
not literally on my own, but oh my god,
But you're helping me understand Kant. That's good. I appreciate it. Okay. So
thank you for letting me have my moment there.
that
Um,
is the end of a paragraph.
um,
Um,
is it? No, it's the end of.
no, I'm pretty sure that that's a new paragraph. He just jam packed it in there.
Wait, we read B223.
Yeah, at the end of 68. No, we didn't read B223. Oh no, I guess it's not.
It's the
Okay,
same
so
paragraph.
I'll finish it up. The very same thing will also hold for the postulates of empirical thinking in general. Yeah, another dynamical principle, which together concern the synthesis of mere intuition, of the form of appearance, of perception, of its matter, uh, and of experience, of the relation of these perceptions. I let's not get into it. He's going to go into it more later.
Yeah.
Namely, that they are only regulative principles and that they differ from mathematical principles, which are constitutive, not to be sure, in their certainty, which is established a priori in both cases, but yet in the manner of their evidence, i.e., with regard to their intuitiveness. I would just like to remark, oh boy, man, sentences, break them up.
He's dead, man. He's not gonna learn from your lessons.
I know, I know. But
I noticed Germans generally write like this though. Like I was translating a lot in German and like they just go comma after comma after comma without like the period. It's painful.
uh,
Hence why
Schopenhauer
reading
doesn't.
Husserl was such a bad experience for you and kind of for me with the little I did. But um,
Schopenhauer doesn't.
well, Schopenhauer was unusually. I'm pretty sure this is
But
what he.
Schopenhauer was an Anglophile. Schopenhauer hated Germany.
Yeah,
So
hence his neat prose. Um, but let's see. Yeah, so I think he's just kind of elaborating on what he's saying here. Um, yeah, he's going out of his analogy for mathematics into saying yes, pretty much what I was like elaborating on. They hold for empirical thinking, um,
yes.
but which concern the synthesis of mere intuition, perception, yeah, namely the regulative principles. Yeah, okay, pretty much just elaboration. Was there any more like thing you wanted to go on that pattern? No.
No, I think we're Gucci.
Cool. Suppose I can read the next paragraph. Um, But what must be remembered about all synthetic principles, and especially noted here, is this: that these analogies have their sole significance and validity not as principles of the transcendental use of the
Oh
understanding.
boy, here we go again.
Uh,
Sorry. He's just
the-
gonna tell us that this isn't concerning noumenon, it's just about phenomenon again.
okay, but
It's one
hence
of
they
those paragraphs.
can be proven only as such. Consequently, the appearances must not be subsumed under the categories per se, but only under their schemata. From for if the objects to which these principles were to be related were things in themselves, it would be
Yep.
entirely impossible to cognize anything about them synthetically a priori. Now it is nothing but appearances whose complete cognition, to which in the end all a priori principles must come down to, is only a possible experience, and consequently those principles can have as their goal nothing but the conditions of the unity of empirical cognition, the synthesis of the appearances. But these conditions are thought only in the schema of the pure concept of the understanding, and the category contains the function, unrestricted by any sensible condition of their unity, as of a synthesis in general. These principles, therefore, justify us in compounding the appearances only in accord with an analogy with the logical and general unity of concepts, and hence in the principle itself we make use of the category. But in its execution, its application to appearances, we set its schema in its place as the key to its use, or rather we set the latter alongside the former as its restricting condition under the name of its formula. Okay, do we mind right after he was going over the obvious like in itself versus appearance? I feel like he was might have been saying something new there.
Okay.
Let me find
Let's
exactly what
unrestricted by any sensible condition. Okay, let's start with now it is nothing. Okay, now it is nothing but appearances whose complete cognition, to which in that end all priori principles must come down to,
Mhm.
its only possible experience.
Right.
Consequently, these principles have as their goal nothing but the conditions of the unity of empirical cognition in the synthesis of appearances. it's a recap. It's
Yep.
how, yeah, okay. So, but these conditions are thought only in the schema of the pure concept of the understanding.
Right. Which is what we went
Okay.
over in the section
Well, he's
prior.
saying right here that we're using schema to do this. Okay, fine.
Hmm.
And the category contains the function unrestricted to any sensible intuition condition of their unity. The category contains the function unrestricted to any sensible condition of their unity as of a synthesis in general. I think he's
The function
explaining
of the
what
category
the
is,
category.
yeah,
Yeah, the category. What the category does
unify.
is, it unifies, but specifically not in any way that has to do with any sensible condition, but just regarding synthesis in general.
Of the schema.
Ah, so a category is the ways in which things are one. The 12 categories are 12 lists of ways in which things can be one.
Which is, I guess, interesting because then unity is one of them.
Yes, unity is
Oh my God.
is yes. Well, unity is the category of categories.
Well, no, there's a difference though. Remember, that was a big point. There's
Yes, there
regular
is.
unity, and then there's the unity of unity.
Yes, exactly.
But
But
then what's the regular
so,
unity
oh,
then?
to answer Heidegger's question, yes, the being of being does have a being.
Oh my God. I don't even understand
um,
that yet. But
I mean, me neither. But Kant is talking something similar. Anyway, as of a synthesis in general. Okay, these principles therefore justify us in compounding the experiences only in accord with an analogy with the logical and general unity of concepts. And hence the principle itself, we make use of the category, but in its execution, we set the schema in its place as the key to its use. Or rather, we set the latter alongside the formula as its restricting condition under the name of the formula. So,
hold on.
I don't really know what that means, but I have
Yeah.
a strong sense that it is not very relevant. And the reason I have a
Well, it's the
strong
last
sense is
sentence
because
before
the
the other
schema
one, so I feel
itself.
like it's worth like making a stink over, just
Okay.
because it's the last thing that I wanted to cover in this like
Okay.
edition anyway.
So if I recall what a schema is, right?
Hmm.
It's basically something constructed in the imagination to
Transcendental
represent,
imagination.
sure, the imagination in its transcendental use. Um, Something constructed imaginatively in order to um, represent all possible uses of a given concept, all possible instances of a given concept.
Yep,
And
like we
so,
have the example of the triangles.
right, to represent all possible triangles, you can't actually just, well, you have to represent, Kant thinks, one specific triangle, but you have to also do that with the consciousness that it's not this triangle that you're using, but triangle as such.
Hmm.
And so any other triangle could be substituted. So that seems like the schema. Okay, so these principles therefore justify us in compounding the appearances, compounding, I guess, putting together,
Hmm.
only in accord with the analogy with the logical and general unity of concepts, and hence in the principle itself we make use of the category, but in its execution we set the schema in its place. I don't know what that means.
Does that just
In
mean
the
like pick a
principle
particular
itself,
schema?
I don't know what that sentence could possibly mean as a whole. So let me break this down into like this clause into one complete sentence.
Hmm.
He's saying, he's saying, in the principle, in schematic, sorry, in principles of all synthetic thought, in the principle itself, we use the category. But in the execution of the principle, i.e., in the application of the principle to appearances, we set the schema in its place. What does that mean?
Well, we set its schema in its place. Oh yeah, I'm pretty sure it's just saying we. Oh wait. Wait. Oh, okay. As the key to its use. So instead of the category, we're using the category's schema? Categories have schemas?
Uh, um,
I thought
so
I
these,
thought concepts just generally had like schemas. I didn't know the
so
categories of
in the
judgment.
principle itself, how exactly do I use a principle in experience? I didn't think I
Well,
used a principle
that's
in
what this is
experience.
about.
No, it was about giving
Well,
like.
this general section I'm saying.
So
Inter-
what he did was he gave the general principle underlying all categories, right? There are principles underlying all categories. Is what this
as
was, right?
applied to appearances.
Sure, that's not the issue. We all
Okay.
know the whole thing pretty much applies to appearances.
Hmm.
Um, okay. Hence, in the principle itself, we make use of the category. No, I got nothing.
Yeah. What does it mean to make use of the category in the principle?
I don't know.
Oh,
I,
I feel like we
I,
were making such I mean, we did. We were doing great
I,
understanding him.
again, I think that this is not tremendously relevant.
Yeah, the more
But
although
I have no idea what it means.
I'm getting that sense that like, yeah, that
But
you
I
are,
have
the more
no
I do.
idea what it means.
Um,
None.
well, here's something maybe, or rather, we set the latter alongside the former as its restricting. Okay, so the latter is the restricting condition of the former. So
Okay,
so the
schema
schema is
is
the
the restricting
restriction
condition
of the category
of the category.
under the name of its formula. So
That
for
makes like 5% sense. Uh, because like any given schema, like in order to make sure that a category makes sense, I have to apply it to my schema in my imagination and be like, yeah, this
oh, that's
category.
what it means by restricting, just to make like restriction from like contradiction.
Yes, I think so.
Okay.
Um, okay. So in its execution, but in the principle itself, we make use of the category. I thought the principles were the basis of the categories.
Yeah, this is why I'm so confused. Like that's what I don't understand what it means to use a category in a principle. Oh, I guess like taking a category and using it in the hmm. Like we have so okay, this reminds me of what we were saying before about like um Pat, when you were kind of making that connection between like the modes of time and like the table that for some reason I like lacked there was a connection between until you made me aware of it. You know what I'm talking about?
Hmm.
Yeah, maybe that's what he means by the category, using the category in the principle. Like we're using the categories that align with what we were talking about, those modes of time, the modi of time, the categories that correspond to them. I think we're using those in the analogies of experience. That makes sense to me, I think.
But I thought in order to have categories at all, we already had to have analogies of experience.
Oh, he did kind of allude to that in a few pages earlier, didn't he?
Well, that's the whole basis of it, right? The whole reason we're doing this is because we need to systematically represent all synthetic principles. What is a principle? It's like the axiom, it's the unquestionable basis on which the categories and all that are built. So, uh,
So is it just saying? It might be just saying that like categories, like the ones that align to persistence, succession, and simultaneity, um, they might just follow the axiom or what is it, the word he's using?
well,
Principle.
yeah, but that's kind of the opposite of what he actually said, isn't it?
Well,
Because he said we make use of the categories in
oh,
in
well, yeah. I'm just trying to make some way this. I'm just figure he's using words weirdly. I'm trying to like make logical sense of this.
it just seems backwards. Like it seems, shouldn't it be the other way around?
We make you category make use of the principle using the category.
Uh, we make use of the principle using no, we make use of the principle to get categories, and then to apply the categories, we need to use schemas as a regulative principle to make sure that they apply to experience. That's what it seems like he should be saying, but that seems like not what he's saying.
Because I know German, like some words sometimes are like not in order, so maybe they just the translators. I don't even want to like go there though. That sounds like blasphemous. And like, or what I mean by that, less jokingly, is like I doubt they would have made such a fundamental error, but I don't know. Maybe that's just a list of things to ask on. Because I don't know if we're gonna get much further than that. That was my best go. Just invert the meaning. But
Just it means the opposite of what it says. Well, it wouldn't be the first time.
yeah, yeah.
Bruh,
uh,
bruh.
All right. Yeah. Um, I'm tired. It's late. I think maybe we'll think about that more and look at secondary resources more. Try to come back to it. Start off attempting to figure out something, and if not, we can move on to the principles of persistence of substance, which yeah, get ready for more wax analogies, people. Well, I don't actually know if we'll bring that up, but
woo, wax gang.
wax gang rise up. Descartes coming out of his grave. Let's fucking go. I knew someone else would understand the persistence of substance. Kant, you genius. What's Goku drip? Oh, that's not very fitting. Descartes coming out of his grave.
um, um,
Well, we'll see you next time for that.
let us know what soundbite we should use for Descartes emerging from his grave.
Talk about the wax and and thereby the persistence of substance. Kantian wisdom of the day. Um, make sure. I had something and I lost it. Feel free to anyone else to jump in with your own Kantian wisdom of the day while I
Make sure
search for
to
mine.
keep your principles dynamic. Yeah, stay dynamic. Keep your
Yeah.
principles
Oh,
dynamic.
make sure you're regulatively using. Yeah, this was going to be mine. Make sure you're regulatively using your principles when doing philosophy and talking about members, meaning like empirical objects and not constitutive ones, because you can't constitutively um, assume that something is going to follow just because you have the a priori regulative rules for it. So don't mix them up. Don't be like Hume or anyone else pre-critical in that. So I don't know. Maybe not everyone pre-critical made this mistake. That seems a bit of a general statement, but does seem like a nice insight for the day.
I mean, probably again, that does seem very
Wait,
broad.
what
At the
mistakes
same
are I was
time,
just I was
I have
correcting?
never read a single person who doesn't make that
I
mistake
was gonna say too.
pre-critical,
So I mean, I could just be
and
limited.
I've read a lot of them.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was kind of lurking for a second there at the end because you said you were ending. I was lurking there for a second. What mistake were you saying?
Um,
The constitutive versus regulative difference we were going over like a bit
Oh,
ago.
yeah,
That was
basically the difference between mathematical principles and
philosophical.
dynamical principles. Yeah,
Yeah.
philosophical principles.
yeah, like and yeah. I mean, was that common before Kant?
No, that's what we're. This I mean, maybe like we don't want to be too
Well,
general, but like
mixing them
this
up
seems to
was
be a
common.
mistake that like people conflated these a lot. I think
Okay,
Spinoza did. That's what
So
I'm going to be
Kant was the
arguing, I
one
think,
who
in my
created.
paper.
Are you
Huh?
saying that Kant basically created the analytic synthetic dichotomy? Is that what it is?
Well, that one to an extent, but that's not even what we were talking about. Uh, we were talking about mathematical and dynamical principles.
Okay. But to my understanding, the difference between like mathematical and dynamical things is part of the analytic synthetic, or the
It's
analytic
not.
is
They're
like
both synthetic.
Yeah, I think you're confusing something else. But that's a good
I
place to
thought
stop the recording. So we'll see
Both
you all next
mathematical.
time.
Yeah.
Peace.